What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. And this time I'm going to be going over each of the first 10 rounds in fantasy drafts this season and telling you guys which player I think is the worst draft pick to make in each of those rounds. This will be the second video in the series. I will have recently put out a best draft pick in each round video where I went over the players that I viewed as the best pick to make in each of the first 10 rounds. So if you want to watch that one after this video, please go do that. I think it'll be really helpful as well. These are all guys that I'm drafting or avoiding in this case in my own drafts, and I highly recommend you do that as well. It's been a lot of fun making these videos. It's good to see which guys that I really think are just pretty much hard avoids for me. A lot of these guys I'm surprised by the ADPs of as well when you really look at them and see just like, wow, this guy's going in the 8th round and he has no business being drafted this high. Or maybe there are some guys that are going in the 7th or 8th round that just really should be going a lot higher. So it's good to really identify those very significant disparities between my rankings and actual rankings and then see where the values and busts are. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And with that, let's get into the first round here. Starting us off with round one, I think the worst draft pick you can make in round one is actually Jonathan Taylor. He's currently being drafted at pick 10 at pick 10 being drafted as the running back 5. I've currently got him ranked as my running back 9, and honestly, I had to work really hard to get him that high in my rankings. This one's really tough for me because we've obviously seen what Jonathan Taylor can do. He finished as the running back 1 overall in fantasy just 2 seasons ago. Last season was a bit of a lost season with the Matt Ryan disaster, the coaching disaster, his ankle injury as well, but I'm worried about the upside here with Jonathan Taylor. The Colts offense is going to struggle really mightily. We always see that with rookie quarterbacks. It's very rare that a rookie quarterback comes in and sustains even a top 15 offense in the NFL. Even top 20 is pretty rare. And especially earlier on in the season, we're going to be dealing with Anthony Richardson, who's quite the raw prospect. He didn't have too many games under his belt at Florida. I would certainly expect this offense to start slow, and that's going to be a slow start for Jonathan Taylor. On top of that, Anthony Richardson just isn't the kind of quarterback that's going to throw the ball to the running backs very often. We often see that mobile quarterbacks are far less likely to dump the ball down to the running back. They'd much rather just take it themselves when things break down in the pocket. And on top of that, Anthony Richardson's certainly going to steal goal line work from Taylor as well. It's just going to really limit his touchdown upside, and that's already going to be limited given how just rarely I think the Colts will find themselves in the red zone this season. So I guess to mention it, just to sum it up, he's going to be a really talented back. He'll be really efficient. He might even average 5 yards per carry this season, but he's going to have very limited receiving upside, and I think his touchdown upside's capped as well just because of the bad offenses in, and Anthony Richardson's going to steal those from him. So I just don't see elite production even as his upside here, and obviously there's pretty significant downside. We saw him finish as the RB18 in running back points per game last season. I think you could easily see him fall that far again this year. I wouldn't expect that. I think he's still going to be a fringe top 10 kind of guy, but I don't think he's anywhere near that RB5, and I'd be absolutely shocked if he put up the RB1 kind of numbers he's put up 2 years ago. And on top of that, we just saw him put out a trade request. He formally requested to be traded for the Indianapolis Colts. That makes it even more likely that he just underperforms this season. He's unhappy with the situation. He and the owner are at odds, and it's just going to be an ugly situation. So I'd just be too scared to draft him in the first round. I really wouldn't do it this season. Moving into round two here, this one was kind of tough for me because I actually liked pretty much every single player that's going in round two. I don't really have any of them ranked significantly below their ADP, but to me it looks like the real worst pick here is actually Patrick Mahomes. He's going at pick 15, which doesn't make much sense to me given that you can get Jalen Hurts at pick 23 or Josh Allen at pick 18. I think that all three of the quarterbacks are going to be really high performers, obviously, but I think they're all going to be really similar to each other, so it's just tough for me to justify being the first team in your draft to take one. I'd much rather take the one of the three that goes far later, and that to me would be Jalen Hurts. I've got Jalen Hurts ranked as my quarterback 1 even. So to me, of those 3 quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes is just the worst value, and I wouldn't really recommend spending a high second-round draft pick on a quarterback. That's just really too steep for me. I generally would prefer to get them in the late second to early to mid-third. So I just find that Mahomes is going to be a bit of a bad value there, but obviously drafting Mahomes is by no means going to tank your season. He's not going to be the reason you lose. I just don't think you're getting as much of a positional advantage as you'd be getting if you got him a little bit later. So I would generally recommend avoiding Mahomes here, but I have no problem if you really want to take him in round 2. Next up in round 3, I think the worst draft pick you can make in round 3 is BREECE Hall. He's currently being drafted at the 26th spot overall, being drafted as the running back 11, and there's really no denying that BREECE Hall is a super talented player. We saw it last season. He was super explosive. Even the game he got hurt in, he had like 4 touches for 72 yards, so he's clearly an extremely explosive player. But I expect him to be limited to start the season. We've got a very long history of running back coming off of torn ACLs and their inability to really produce early on in their first season back. Adrian Peterson being like the one exception that comes to mind in terms of any sort of recent performance, but even that was about 10 years ago at this point. And on top of that, we see that Dalvin Cook is really likely to sign with the Jets. He was at practice for them earlier today. He said on NFL Network that it was very likely that he'd end up as a member of the Jets, and Aaron Rodgers just cleared up cap room for the Jets as well to do that. So I'd expect Dalvin Cook to honestly get the majority of the workload, especially earlier on in the season. I think that Breece Hall is a better player than Dalvin Cook once they're both fully healthy. So by the end of the second half of the season, Breece Hall could take over there. But even without factoring in Dalvin Cook, when I've done my initial projections for this season, Breece Hall ranked out as my RB17. I think that they're going to be a pretty low volume offense. It's going to be a team that's going to throw most of their touchdowns as well. And now he's going to be splitting time with Dalvin Cook even when he's fully healthy. So I didn't like his ADP when he was the only guy there, and now it just really doesn't make sense to me. Up next in round 4, I think the worst draft pick you can make in this round is actually going to be Dameon Pierce. I do believe that Dameon Pierce is a talented running back. We saw that a lot on the field last season. There was explosive play after explosive play, watching him break tackles. He's a really fun player to watch, but he's going to find himself in a timeshare in this offense. The Texans added Devin Singletary this offseason, who I think is a perfectly capable running back, and I actually think he's a better pass catcher as well. I would personally expect the Houston Texans to utilize Devin Singletary in third downs and in the 2-minute offense, so that's obviously going to limit Dameon Pierce's upside, and on top of that, he's going to be on a bad offense. This is going to be a team, again, captained by a rookie quarterback. It's going to be tough for them to score too many touchdowns this season. So generally what you find from the running back position is that the most value you get out of the guys are the guys that catch passes and the guys that score touchdowns. I don't think Dameon Pierce is going to catch many passes, and he's obviously not going to score many touchdowns because the Texans won't. So maybe he puts up a fluky touchdown performance season. Maybe he finds his way to double-digit touchdowns, but that's really the only way that he even pays off as ADP. I've currently got him ranked to my RB 37. I think his ADP is RB like 21 right now. I just don't want to rely on him as my RB2. I think there are going to be a lot of weeks where he doesn't get a touchdown. You're going to be really frustrated, and just drafting him in round 4 is just way too high for me. I'd have him as like a 6th or 7th round draft pick for myself. Next up in round 5, I think the worst draft pick you can make here is actually DeAndre Hopkins. The Titans are going to be a generally low passing volume offense. They're going to be a slow-paced offense as well, and they're just not going to score a whole lot in general as well. When they score, it's going to be through Derrick Henry. He's obviously going to be the focal point of this offense, and even if DeAndre Hopkins is still an elite wide receiver, he emerges as the number 1 on the Titans, and he just obviously dominates the target share for this team. He still projects for me to finish below his ADP, having projected him to be the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee. I gave him a 26.5% target share, projected him for about the same efficiency he's had throughout his career. He still stats out as my wide receiver 36 just because of how low the passing volume for this Titans offense is going to be. He's got an ADP of a wide receiver 21 right now. I just also think that there's a very realistic chance. I'm not exactly projecting that, but it's quite possible that DeAndre Hopkins falls off a cliff. He's getting up there in age. He's been hurt each of the last 2 seasons, so it's very possible that we could see DeAndre Hopkins get hurt. Maybe he's just not the same receiver that he was even last year, and if that happens, he's just going to be a true bust. So to me, the way his range of outcomes range is from anywhere from being a wide receiver 3 to being just a complete bust where you're drafting him, and he's currently being drafted to be a wide receiver 2 for you. I would not feel comfortable drafting Hopkins and depending on him to be a starter for me every single week, and I can't justify drafting him in round 5 because there's so many of the players I love are in that range. Next up in round 6, we've got another player that I actually think is really talented, but I just don't see it working out for him this season. That's Michael Pittman Jr. I think that he's just in a really brutal spot to perform this season. Anthony Richardson is going to have a hard time throwing for 3,000 yards this season. I believe I've got him projected for something around 2,800. And even with the team throwing for 3,800 passing yards last season, obviously it was a really brutal season, but 3,800 passing yards is decent enough in order to sustain some sort of fantasy production for receivers in an offense. Michael Pittman only had 925 receiving yards last year. I would certainly expect that number to drop this season as the overall passing volume and passing just prowess of the team is going to be worse this season than it was last year. And on top of that, Michael Pittman has yet to finish as a top 20 wide receiver in his career. Obviously, I do think Pittman's really talented. I think he's got the talent to be a high-end fantasy contributor if he was in the right position, but it's just not it for him this season. I've currently got him statted out to be my wide receiver 49. His ADP is wide receiver 29. I think that it's just going to be really dependent on him scoring a lot of touchdowns for him to really end up breaking that ADP. And like I talked about with Jonathan Taylor earlier, this is not a team that I'm expecting to score a ton of touchdowns. It's just going to be tough for him to find that. When they get towards the goal line as well, it's going to be Jonathan Taylor running it in or Anthony Richardson running it in. So he's not going to be a very significant red zone option. He's also not really the deep threat on the team. It's more of Alec Pierce's role. So he'll be their possession receiver. He's going to be really good between the 20s. He'll probably have like 800 receiving yards, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns this season. But that's just not going to get it done as a wide receiver 29. Next up in round 7, the player that I think is kind of the worst draft pick in this round is just Dak Prescott. He had his worst season as a pro last season, even leading the league in turnovers despite having missed 4 or 5 games. The Cowboys have also been vocal about wanting to establish their running game and win with their defense. It kind of makes sense how they want to build that team around the defense. The defense is clearly elite. They've got a good running game. They've got a really good offensive line. They brought in Brian Schottenheimer as their offensive coordinator, who historically has a very slow pace of play, very highly they've run very frequently under Brian Schottenheimer. I still think that that can be a really efficient player. I still would expect him to average about 8 yards per attempt, be a guy that throws for about 4,000 yards, maybe about 30 touchdowns this season, but he doesn't run the ball the way he used to. We used to see him get 6 rushing touchdowns per year, add on a couple, 400 rushing yards, and that just hasn't happened since he's come back from his broken ankle. And if volume is removed from his passing game and there's no way he's going to be running the ball like he used to, there's just no way he really cracks the top 10 this season. If I'm going to be drafting a mobile or an immobile quarterback, I'd much rather draft guys like Tua or Kirk Cousins, who are going to be in much higher volume, much more explosive offenses than the Cowboys. And like I said, you're not really getting anything on the ground out of Dak like you used to, so you might as well draft the guys that are going to throw the ball 600, 700 times this season instead of the guy that's going to throw 450 to 500 times. So Dak will be fine. I've got him projected to be my quarterback 17, though, so I think he's going to be more of like a weekly streaming option, not a guy that you want to start every single week. And if you're drafting him as ADP of quarterback 10, you're sort of forcing yourself to count on him, and I don't want to have to do that on a weekly basis. In round 8, I think the worst draft pick you can actually make is going to be A.J. Dillon. I just don't really understand what we're hoping for with A.J. Dillon here. Jones is going to be the dominant pass-catching running back in this offense, so we're going to lose out on any opportunity for A.J. Dillon to be a contributor in the passing game, and the Packers are going to be a very slow-paced, mediocre offense at best. That's assuming that Jordan Love is okay, and if he's bad, then this is going to be just a really bad offense. A.J. Dillon was inefficient last season as a runner, only averaging 4.2 yards per carry. It didn't even look like it. It looked like he was much worse than that, and I've actually got him ranked right at his ADP of RB32, which is where he's being drafted, but I just don't see any real upside. The only way he really outperforms that ADP to me is if Aaron Jones gets hurt and they're forced to use him as a pass catcher, but if you're drafting him here, you're basically drafting him to be the guy that you're comfortable playing, as your flex, maybe your low-end RB2 if you need to, and they're just guys with way more upside being drafted around him, even at the running back position, guys like Antonio Gibson, Rashad Penny, guys that I think have legitimate windows to being, or pathways to being top 20 guys, and A.J. Dillon just doesn't have that. I think the floor is also really low. We saw A.J. Dillon be just almost unplayable in fantasy all of last season until this latter 5 games where he managed to keep falling in the end zone. This is going to be a worse offense than it was in the past, and what we know about A.J. Dillon is that if he doesn't fall in the end zone, he's not a good fantasy contributor, and I think there's going to be a lot less of that this season than there was last year. So just don't waste your time on A.J. Dillon. He's going to be okay. He's not going to be a difference maker for you, and he's just not really worth drafting there. In round 9, this one was really easy for me. I think the worst draft pick you can make here is going to be Odell. It's been 18 months since Odell Beckham Jr. last played meaningful football. That was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. He's entering what he admits to be his final year in the NFL. He's already told reporters that he thinks this will be his last year, and that really indicates that he's already got one foot out the door. He just got a 1-year, $18 million deal. He got his bag. I think he's pretty happy with that and doesn't really feel the need to work any harder. The Ravens are also historically run-heavy offense. They're not a team that's really likely to air it out, even though they've said they want to be a little bit more pass-heavy this season. But he's likely the number 4 target in this offense. They've talked a lot about Zay Flowers and how great he looks. We saw Rashad Bateman be really efficient last season before he got hurt, and obviously this offense runs through Mark Andrews, so maybe Odell finds his way as the number 3 option. I would still project him to be the number 4 target in this offense. He's not very good anymore. He's old. He was ranked 77th in terms of separation on his routes run just 2 years ago, and now he's going to be older and coming off a second torn ACL. So Odell to me just really has no place being drafted anywhere near the top 100, and that's where he's being drafted right now. So just don't fall for the name value here. That's the only thing propping him up. There'll be a couple highlights throughout training camp. He'll make a one-handed catch, and everyone's going to get all googly-eyed and want to draft him a lot, but he's just not it. He's maybe going to have 40 catches this year for 500 yards, a couple touchdowns. It's not going to be it. He's getting overpaid. He's not as good as he used to be, and just don't fall for the name value there. Don't draft Odell. And lastly, in round 10, we've got Cole Kmet. I think that Cole Kmet's actually a really talented player. I liked him coming out of Notre Dame. He's actually flashed a couple times. He's made some really quality catches, and he actually did develop quite a bit last season. The Chicago Bears did just give him a 4-year, $50 million deal as well, which is pretty funny that we're seeing him get more than what Saquon was able to get on a per-year basis. But the fact of the matter is he's going to be the number 3 target in this Bears offense, and that's at best. That's assuming he ends up finishing the season with more targets than Chase Claypool, but behind Mooney and DJ Moore. And it's going to be a very low-volume offense. This is going to be a team that wants to run the ball a ton, and even when they call pass plays, Justin Fields will likely run the ball quite a bit as well. He put up good numbers last season in the second half once Darnell Mooney went out, but that's when he was pretty much the only healthy competent player on the offense left outside of Justin Fields, and even with that, it required really unstable touchdown production. I believe he scored 7 touchdowns over the second half of last season. That's just not something that's going to happen on what I project to be your bottom 15 offense this season. He's currently being drafted as the tight end 12, so you're not exactly drafting him to be a world beater here, but I've got him buried in my rankings at tight end 24. I just don't see any real path to upside here given how low volume this offense is going to be. I'd much rather draft guys that are going later, guys like Gerald Everett, for example, guys like Greg Dulcich, guys that I actually think have legitimate top 8 upside, and I just don't think Cole Kmet has that. So I just think it's kind of a waste of a pick. It's going to be a guy that you're going to be praying for a touchdown every single week, and if it doesn't happen, you're going to be disappointed. And if you draft him, you'll likely be looking at the waiver wire pretty early on in the season. So that'll do it for the worst draft pick in each of the first 10 rounds. Hope you really enjoyed the video. If you haven't already seen the best draft pick in each of the first 10 rounds, I highly recommend you go watch that. And a little bit ago, I put out the riskiest and the safest draft picks in each of the first 10 rounds as well. If you want to go watch those, I highly recommend you take a look at those as well. Up next, I'll be doing a mock draft or mock auction draft on the Sleeper platform. I recently did one on the Yahoo platform as well, and there were some requests from you guys in the comments to do one on Sleeper, so went ahead and did that. I highly recommend you watch those videos as well, especially if you're in auction drafts. And if you're not in auction drafts, I highly recommend you convince your league to switch. They're far more fun, far more engaging, and I personally just haven't been able to go back once I switched over. So with that, I just want to thank all you guys for taking the time to watch the video. If you did like the video, please do give it a thumbs up on the YouTube algorithm. It really helps just grow the channel, really helps me know that I'm doing a good job. If this is your first time on the channel, thank you so much for stopping by, and if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel. Really want to grow the channel as much as we can. We're at like 480 subscribers right now. I'd love to hit 500 by the start of the NFL season. I think we're going to do it, but let's see if we can get there, see if you can be that 500th subscriber. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteeleFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.